me jump over to here to LinkedIn, make sure I have a tab open. Move it over here. And it looks like we're live. Welcome, everyone, to episode 12 of the Level Up Your Wealth podcast, where we talk about the gaming industry from a business perspective. One of your hosts, Marcus Howard, joined by Mario. Mario, please introduce yourself.
What's going on, y'all? Hope all is well. Mario Payton, beautiful, but rainy, storming, actually, Jacksonville, Florida. So I'm here. You guys are tuned in with us. I know you'll be watching a lot of other shows right now, but y'all tuned in to us. So definitely happy.
Yeah, we're gonna have a little bit of a different episode today. You know, normally we have a featured guest. We don't have a featured guest this week. We'll have some more coming up next week. But I've been having a lot of conversations about sports washing, esports, sustainability, and so I want to answer some questions. I've got some strong opinions, some unpopular opinions about those topics that I wanted to share. They're just my opinions, right? Some folks share my opinions. I think there's a minority of people who share my opinions about the space, but I think largely most people don't share my opinion. So if you disagree with me, that's fine, right? This is a professional podcast. You're welcome to have differing opinions. You're welcome even to debate, right? We're happy to have that conversation, but I want to share just the perspective I have. I invite you to share your perspective. At the end of the day, if I'm wrong, great. I'd be happy and thrilled to be wrong, because unfortunately, if I'm right, we may have another massive round of layoffs across the global esports ecosystem from what I believe is happening in Saudi Arabia, and a separate massive round of layoffs in the collegiate ecosystem from the upcoming enrollment cliff.
Now,
So
wasn't it just
go
was
ahead.
this like
Go ahead.
wasn't it a large amount of layoffs like a year and a half ago?
We did. So a year ago, over the last 24 months, we had a significant number of layoffs. Just as like one point of reference, FaZe Clan, arguably like the most popular, one of the largest, it's particularly the highest valued esports organization in the world. I want to say had a total layoff of about 52% of their total staff, and
Half the workforce.
half the workforce. They had multiple rounds of layoffs, but when you add up the aggregate number of people who were laid off, it was about 50% of the staff.
Didn't help their stock, I know that much, but okay.
Yeah. And so, I didn't want to see that happen, the layoffs. I didn't want to see the valuation destroyed when they went to the public markets. And I was the day that they announced they were doing that, I said, I think this is a mistake and it's going to create issues for the global ecosystem. A lot of folks didn't appreciate that perspective. I caught a lot of flack. I told you before, I'm some combination of shadow banned and blacklisted in esports because I've carried these unpopular opinions. And I don't mean anything against esports. I think esports is here to stay. I want to see it grow, both with professional organizations, collegiate esports organizations. Having government support is great, but there's a right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. And unfortunately, the layoffs we saw the last 2 years are a result of the wrong way to do it. And I think we may be doing some more things wrong. So I'm going to share my screen. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Again, I want to make this conversational. I hope it's not a lecture. Mario, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me, ask questions. So I'm gonna make sure that I take several mini breaks, because I also have some water here I'm going to drink. But the first thing that I want to talk about is sports washing. So the title of this event was Unsustainable Esports in Saudi Arabia and Collegiate or Higher Education. So we're going to talk about Saudi Arabia first. And so the first thing we're going to talk about Saudi Arabia is sports washing. Again, some caveats before we jump into it. I believe that the Middle East and North Africa, the MENA region, deserves gaming and esports like every other ecosystem around the world, both the benefits, the fun, the excitement. And I believe in government supporting their local ecosystems for esports. I think that's a great thing. I'd love to see our country, the US, to do that. Like we see other governments providing stipends and tax credits, et cetera. What's happening specifically in Saudi Arabia is they're now kind of subsidizing the global ecosystem. And in that, they're monopolizing the global ecosystem. A recent report last week said that they own like 40% of esports. The Saudi Arabian government owns 40% of esports.
Oh, the government.
the
That's the
government.
what's like the sovereign fund of
So they've got the PIF. I think it's Public Investment Fund. I might be misquoting that, but they
yeah.
also have Saudi Games Group, which is where the majority of their ownership in esports happens.
Okay.
So let me share my screen. And so the first thing I want to talk about is sports washing. And a lot of folks, I'm learning more and more people don't know what that is. And what it is when you have something that you do that maybe could be perceived as unethical or immoral, you typically will take something like sports, which is very popular, people have a high opinion of, and use that to basically wash away the negative reputation or the negative attention you're getting for the thing that may be unethical or immoral. So I'm just going to read this explanation, this top piece of it. What is sports washing? Sports washing is the use of sport to redirect public attention away from unethical conduct. The intended effect is to improve the reputation of the offending entity by using the immense popularity of sport to wash away poor publicity. The most high-profile instances of sports washing are carried out by authoritarian states that have committed human rights abuses, but commercial businesses also engage in the practice. So that's a high level. If you want to go to the website, it's humanrights.unsw.edu/au. There are several other sites where you can read about that, but basically sports washing is using sports to cover up something you're doing that people otherwise don't approve of, right? Do you have any questions about sports washing, Mario? If not, I'll move on.
Now, so this reminds me like the uproar a couple years ago with Live Golf, like Live Golf
Mm-hmm.
came out, and like it was like a huge uproar, like you're supporting. It was either Dubai or Saudi Arabia. It was supporting that, and they would talk about some of the things that the government allegedly did. It was like a huge thing, and like the PGA Tour basically kicked people off who was golfing for Live, but then now it's like it didn't happen. Like Live is actually in the process of buying the PGA Tour. All the golfers can kind of go cross platform between Live and the PGA Tour. So the outrage that the PGA had, quickly died down, very
Yep.
quickly died down. So
Yep.
yeah.
That's exactly what happened. I think Saudi Arabia ended up buying Live. So people who were dissenting, or sorry, they own Live, and then PGA I think got acquired by Live. So it all got merged in, which again now owned by the Saudi Arabian state. And so that's sports washing. That's them using their money to acquire something popular to kind of again distract or sleight of hand for the other things that are happening in the ecosystem. And I saw this from James Fudge. I don't know if he's tuning in today, but James Fudge is an independent journalist who covers the gaming and esports industry. And he shared a report that said that on average, an execution happens in Saudi Arabia every other day. Every 2 days, they execute someone.
Wow. Now, from I know we're talking about sports washing, but from a business standpoint, like, wouldn't it be looked at as good business? Not the illegal stuff, but like buying different like buying a PGA Tour. Like, wouldn't that be looked at as good business because if they're able to kind of drive revenues as a because it's a pension fund, right? If they were to drive revenues, would that be looked at as sports washing, or would that be looked at as just good business?
I guess it's good business potentially, and I know that you're trying to make an apples to apples comparison here. So I hear what you're saying. If it was the pension fund that did this, and I don't know if the Saudi Games Group is a pension fund or PIF is a pension fund. Maybe it is. I'm not that familiar with the financials behind it. I think the challenge is that people are calling um, for awareness of these human rights issues, and I believe the leadership of the Saudi Arabian community, the Saudi Arabian state, has said that they're trying to become more progressive, and they've got the decade of change, right? Which sounds good in theory, but in practice, these things are still happening. And I've got an example of that just from a few weeks ago. So let me share that. So one example is, share this tab instead. This woman's name is Manahel Al Otaibi. She was just recently, like, this article is from April 30th. We're in July, so 2 months ago, 3 months ago. She was recently sentenced to 11 years in prison. Her offense, and I guess it's best if I just read it directly. So she's jailed 11 years for online expression supporting women's rights. Saudi Arabia's authorities must have, this is a letter from amnesty.org, which is a nonprofit that supports human rights around the world. So this letter is to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's authorities must immediately and unconditionally release Manahel al-Tayibi, a 29-year-old fitness instructor and women's rights activist who has been sentenced to 11 years in prison because of her choice of clothing and support of women's rights. Amnesty International and ALQST said today. So her choice of clothing was she chose not to wear an abiyah, I believe it's pronounced, the head covering, right?
Mhm.
You see that she's wearing what you would normally see in the U.S., right, on any given day. And she's been advocating for women's rights. For example, there's some controversy about the, what is it? I'm going to misspeak on it now, but there is women in Saudi Arabia don't have the right to travel on their own. There's a specific term from it, and I'm blanking on it right now. But they have to have basically with their father or their older brother, someone has to give them permission to travel. And so she has protested against that because she believes it undermines the basic human rights that women should have. And they're the same rights that are enjoyed across the world, including here in the US. And because of that, those combination of things, and posting a photo of her wearing these clothes, she was jailed 11 years. She's actually housed in a prison, as I understand it, 20 minutes away. Let me take a step back. So this is important for Saudi Arabia because they're hosting the Esports World Cup. It's basically the Olympics for the global esports ecosystem. People around the world are right now in Saudi Arabia playing video games at a very high level, competing in what is effectively Olympics. 20 minutes away, literally 20 minutes away from where they're competing, she's being housed in prison, and people are suggesting that she's being tortured and otherwise like provided an inhumane experience while she's arrested for, again, advocating for women's rights. So them using esports and not advocating for her release or advocating for giving women in Saudi Arabia the right to travel, that's sports washing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so another question with her, because I know they're deep of religion. So like, is this more like because of their religion? And I don't know, so I'm asking because of their religion, or it's like a law? Because I know some in Middle Eastern countries, they have their rules not based on government per se, but based on religion. So is this like more of a religious thing, or is this more like actual the government saying you should be wearing your head covering per se, and you did not?
I am not an, I think, anthropologist is the whatever the term is, where
Yeah.
my level of world history is poor. What I understand is that it is religion that is codified into law.
Hmm.
And hopefully, if anybody's tuning in on LinkedIn, if you have that technical term for women in Saudi Arabia not being able to, guardianship. James has joined us. Thank you, James. Guardianship. So again, I share that link, and I have several links from his website that we'll go over here. But guardianship is where women are not allowed to travel without the permission of men.
Okay.
Several other, and if you, I've got several videos that I've been a part of. Twitter Spaces where it's been talked about in more detail. I'll share those on LinkedIn and I'll send some to you. But the long and short of it is there's just not equal rights, gender equity in terms of the law.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, and I know here, like we have separation between church and state. But apparently, which we all know, but that's why I asked: is it more religious or is it more government? But I guess if it's both codified together, then it's a little bit of one, a little bit of the other. 11 years though. That's and then also like do they have laws in the book? Did she know that she would get 11 years? Like, it might be like, well, you can go to jail. And I'll go to jail for 11 days, 11 weeks. So I mean, so that's just that's tough.
So, and again, I don't have all the exact details right now in front of me, but as if my memory serves correctly, she was sentenced by a secret council. So it wasn't done like the typical, what we would expect is like due process. She didn't receive due process.
Okay.
And that happens time and time again, especially people who are political dissidents. And another example, and actually I should pull that up. Jamal, what's his last name, James? Jamal, let me see if I can Google it really quickly. Saudi Arabia. There was a journalist. Here it is.
Khashoggi.
Khashoggi. I'm going to butcher that, so I apologize. Yeah, but this journalist 5 years ago was critical of the Saudi Arabian government and he went to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, and he was hacked into several smaller pieces and carried away in briefcases. And there has not been enough justice for him. I think there's been some admission of guilt. Some people have been identified as responsible, but he has not received the justice that you would expect for someone who is just doing his job as a journalist, right?
Yeah, I definitely remember that. 2018, yeah, that was a huge story here. Huge story here in America. Huge story.
So again, there are a number of other instances like that with like the LGBTQ community. There is the fact that I want to say, and I'm gonna Moroccan, that might be the wrong company or country, but they basically have institutionalized slavery, like modern day slavery, to do a lot of the progressive work and building that they're doing to create the mega cities in Saudi Arabia. It's literally slavery. The conditions are slave conditions. So those things again are not being addressed by the government, not being fixed by the government. And they've put in the contracts, again, back to bring us all back to esports, they put in the contracts to people who attended that they're not allowed to talk about those things. So while they're saying that we should go in order to support the culture, not to boycott, and that we should be accepting of cultures, and we should be accepting of cultures, I think there are limits there. Obviously, murder is over that limit, and we're not seeing like the change for the Saudi Arabian people, even though they're giving all of this pomp and circumstance and fanfare for the international community to come here and celebrate like these rights exist for the Saudi Arabian people. Does that make sense?
Mm. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. Are people in the esports community over there protesting? 'Cause I mean, imagine people went for the events. Like, do you have protesting, or that has came up?
It's not happening at all because of the sports washing. So one of the things that happened, so you had again the journalist who was murdered. Saudi Arabia didn't have to threaten anyone with murder, with death, because they basically bought them all. Some people would describe it as esports selling out, right? Just like they would describe the money that we got in from venture capital as selling out to the VCs. Some might describe it as selling out to Saudi Arabia. And actually, I on that note, I have this. Where is it? Oh, I don't have it. I have there was a quote from, I don't have it available. I had a quote from one of the popular people in esports. His name is, I'm blanking on his name as well. He works for he runs a podcast called The Business of Esports. He basically went to an esports conference in the Middle East and said that there's so much money coming from the Middle East, particularly from Saudi Arabia, that sustainability, he said profitability is no longer concerned.
Wow.
So like they have so much money they're dumping into the ecosystem, they've bought everyone else's silence.
Wow. Yeah. That's oil, man. It'll be interesting because now the US is like the world's biggest producer of oil. So it'll be interesting to see 10, 15, 20 years from now how much clout some of the Middle Eastern countries have, because getting a lot of money from import, we're more export import oil. Like if we're drilling more, if we're exporting more, if we become the nation, the world's biggest provider of oil. I don't know. Of course, they have money, but like the influence, I don't know how big the influence will be. It's interesting. Very interesting.
So here is that quote. I don't want to misquote the name. So it's Paul DeWallaby, and he goes by the Prophet. That's his moniker in the esports ecosystem. He says the MENA region is the last bastion of hope for esports, as so much money, especially from Saudi, is being invested that profitability issues are not a concern. I disagree with that statement. Again, it's my opinion. I think is unpopular in the space, but I think the rest of the popular kind of tier one ecosystem agrees with them. They're happy to see that Saudi Arabia is just basically dumping bags and bags of money back into esports because that's how he's making his money. That's how they're all making their money is basically handouts from a government. And again, I'm not against governments supporting esports, but I would like to see governments supporting local esports. This government is subsidizing the global ecosystem.
So your gripe is not the human rights thing is something that we all just don't agree with, right? But I
Right.
guess your gripe is that they are monopolizing esports. Is that what that is?
They're monopolizing it, but more importantly, they're creating a single point of failure. So the reason they're able to do what they've done is because there was a fire sale on literally the global ecosystem, right? The ecosystem was, I had made, I want to say this was like 18 months ago. One of my predictions was that by the end of 2023, 90% of VC backed esports organizations were going to merge or close because the bubble was crashing. Like VC dollars had moved on to Web3 and to AI.
Yeah.
Esports organizations burned all the bridges with sponsors because they didn't really care at all about like providing a return on investment. So basically all the money had dried up and the business models weren't sustainable to begin with. And so we needed a full reset. And had the Saudi Arabian government not stepped in, then we would have had that reset. But since they have, now we've got the ecosystem floating, and it's still unsustainable. And I think it's creating a single point of failure. So eventually, I believe in the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to take that money out because there's no money to be really made at scale in esports. And now everybody has been addicted to that money for so many years, prioritizing that money for so many years that it's going to be the crash that we needed last year. That was bound to happen last year.
Here, what they're doing, I would imagine they're spending so much money, they have to have some type of forecast and that's going on. So the question is, why would they just be pumping money into something that's not sustainable, that's going to blow up your face? I didn't mean it like that. That's going to be a horrible investment. Why would somebody do that?
So I asked that question directly to His Royal Highness MBS, and again, I'm not good with the name, so it's not out of with all due respect, I don't remember his entire name, and I'm terrible with names. But he made a post, and he's been very active in the gaming industry and on LinkedIn celebrating the Esports World Cup. And I said, "What about any of this is sustainable?" Honest question. And the responses that I got, none of them really had like any answer to how it is sustainable. But they did speak to the reason he was doing is they're hoping it will draw tourism into the country. They create these esports cities. Their hope is that people will around the world travel to Saudi Arabia to be a part of these esports cities, because part of the contract that they have with these organizations is that they're requiring those teams to have a headquarters or a satellite office in Saudi Arabia. That's their hope.
Okay.
So that their play is spend the money. Hopefully they get the return on tourism. But one of the things that I've also said is I think that the culture, and then nothing against the religion or the culture, but the culture of Saudi Arabia is in direct conflict with the culture of gaming. And so that's why I think they're not going to see that return that they're looking for. This is a report from the Entertainment Software Association. It says that as of 2024, this is a 2024 report, 2024, two things here. 46% of gamers in the US identify as female. And so you could say generally that speaks for probably the global ecosystem, plus or minus 2 or 3 points. And then it says 11% identify as LGBTQ. So if you combine those minority groups, you're probably looking at north of 50%, right? Out of those two demographics who are marginalized and even, their health and safety and their livelihoods are at risk in the Saudi Arabian community. So if you were spending money on these esports orgs and saying, hey, you should come spend your time and money here, you have not only those individuals who are marginalized, but folks who don't agree with the lack of safety for those marginalized groups who are not going to go to Saudi Arabia because they don't agree, either because it impacts them directly or indirectly.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like, why are you going to support something that doesn't support you in the first place?
Yeah. So I don't think that they're going to start to make that money. And again, in addition to that, esports has never been a huge moneymaker, right? From a revenue perspective, it's like less than 0.5% of the global industry's revenue. Again, largely none of the organizations are profitable. And we've seen that actually even from Saudi, from the Saudi Arabian government themselves. Let me share this screen. So Saudi Games Group is the channels, the vehicles by which the Saudi government makes investments into gaming and esports around the world. They own Scopely. Scopely makes Monopoly Go. And in this article, when it says that they're going to invest more in mobile after Monopoly Go, you have to pay for the whole article. So I can't show you the quote here from this article, but if you have a Bloomberg subscription, you're welcome to, or go search the internet. James may have it in one of his articles. I'm going to paraphrase this. They basically said that they're no longer going to make large, significant investments in esports moving forward out of this fund, a $38 billion fund, no longer making significant investments. They didn't say they're going to stop making investments. They said they're not going to make any more significant because they recognize that there's no money in it.
So with the explosion of gaming, more games coming out, more people playing games than ever before historically, you don't think esports has a way to actually make money? Or you think it's all localized and you can't make it from a massive scale?
I think it can make money. And that's, I try to talk to you about this all the time. Again, I've been shadow banned, so not a lot of people are listening, but I believe that the path to profitability is what I describe as Esports 2.0. And Esports 2.0 is shorthand for impact focused, brand relevant, competitive gaming communities. Though all of those are important, right? Impact focus, aligning esports with your business goals, your existing business goals. And at least in this case, that's what they're doing. They're aligning it with tourism. They don't really care about esports. They care about the sports washing in order to increase the tourism. They want to make 1% of, I think, their global GDP to come from gaming, which is roughly $20 billion. And James, correct me if I'm wrong on those numbers. So impact focus, brand relevant, right? What's important to your brand? And again, they're what's the word I want to use? They are adopting, if you will, the global ecosystem. So they're doing that as well. But competitive gaming communities, they don't necessarily have a community. They have a community in Saudi Arabia, their own team. They have their own team. They own their own team. But the wider community is not their community. Again, you have women in the LGBTQ community and those who support those groups or who generally don't agree with modern day slavery are going to be against, aren't going to want to be meaningful parts and significant parts of that community.
I understand that. Now, the reason why I ask is because if it is a way, because of course, I'm all about business, right? I have my own businesses. So if it is a way to scale, like that's what you do, like you dump a little bit of money into it, you see what works, you see what doesn't work, you put a little bit more money into it. Then once you have a proven system, then you go all in. So this might be a way for them to, I'm not saying admit that they were wrong, but for them to kind of say, we're putting money in, it didn't work, we're still going to try to put money in to see what does work. And then if they find something that does work, then kind of go, not all in because they have a lot of money, but they can really kind of go in and really invest. So you think that might be what's going on, or you think that they're going to continue to slow down and not invest at all going forward?
I think that they are already doing it now, right? So this link is one example, right? They have decided that they found their cash cow. It's mobile games. I think what they're going to start to do with the rest of that fund is dump it into either more games at Scopely or acquiring other games companies that are making scalable money, right? Like the global market of esports in 2023 was only $1 billion. And that it's still collapsing outside of the artificial inflated ecosystem they created. So there's no way they're going to get to $20 billion between here and 2030 through esports. It's like mathematically impossible. And so they've already said that here, right? Then they've also shown it in their investments. So let me share this screen. They acquired, or two things. This is separate, but and again, this is from James's website. They're already adjusting from their grandiose announcements of building mega cities and major projects to say some of these things aren't working, so we're going to scale back our investments and like you said, right, like focus in on what works, don't focus on the things that don't work. With that said, they're doing that now in esports. Again, esports advocate. And again, shout out to James Fudge. He's an independent journalist. You don't see this coverage on the mainstream sites because they actually either own those sites or they have invested money in. For example, Savvy Games Group, I believe it's Savvy Games Group. Again, correct me, James. Has sponsored content. They basically revived the gaming vertical of Rolling Stone. So it's an extension now of the Saudi Arabian government.
Wow.
Anyway, back to this site, this independent site. So this group, ESL Faceit, was acquired by the Savvy Games Group, and then they reportedly cut 65 employees. That was a year ago, right?
Okay.
And then February of this year, that same group owned by the Saudi government through the Savvy Games Group laid off 15% of the global workforce.
Wow. The global workforce, their group were in esports altogether.
That's an esports organization they acquired. They laid off 65 people and then went on and laid off an additional 15% of the global group. And then that same group.
It was no justification, just the budget, I guess.
Say again.
So no justification, just to balance the budget.
I think balance the budget. I think that here's my honest opinion is that the folks at the top of the leadership of the organization didn't understand the business model of esports. They bought into the hype like everybody else did, like higher education did. And we're going to get to higher education. And now that the rubber is starting to meet the road, they don't want to just keep burning money because it's not making money back. So they laid off folks. And then that same group is asking for the talent that's broadcasting their events to take a pay cut in the region of 15%, like after they already did the global layoffs and laid off those other 65 people.
Yeah. Cost money. A thing like that.
Yeah. So it's just tough to hear all of these counterintuitive points like profitability is not a concern when obviously it's a concern.
Yeah.
So I don't want to harp on that anymore, but that's my thoughts of why I would not be surprised. Again, they've got this goal 2030 that if they want to reach $20 billion, the way to do it is through gaming, not through esports. So I think they're going to continue to fund the Esports World Cup at the same level they're funding it now. From what I've heard, they put in $250 million, $250 million for this year's event. I think that they will do a similar number next year to try to improve on the opportunities from this year. And if the third year, 2026, doesn't give them the numbers, they're going to start rapidly reducing the prize pools.
Yeah.
So that's Saudi Arabia in a nutshell. Did you have any questions from any of that or from James? James is sharing a bunch of insights in the chat here.
Yeah, that's great information, James.
Yeah, so they're working on tourism, entertainment projects. They want to ultimately diversify away from oil.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if they saw the huge influx of people going into Dubai, and they were like, we need to get some of this as well. Yeah, I mean, you don't hear people talking about Dubai as much as maybe 5 years ago. It's more, I think Mexico you hear a lot of people traveling to, but I know it was 5 years ago. Dubai was like it was the place. It was the place of all places. Now I hear a lot of people going to Abu Dhabi. Excuse me if I'm wrong, but Abu Dhabi and Qatar. A lot of people saying that they're going to Saudi Arabia. Maybe they're trying to ride that internet.
Yeah, I think that's where they're trying to get. They want to be like the new Dubai or the global. They want to be the global hub for gaming and esports, particularly esports, because again they can acquire 40% of the ecosystem for relatively pennies on the dollar, which is what they did. So I wanted to give a couple more shout outs. So James did say that they're theocracy. So it's the enforcement of their Islamic law.
Islamic law. There you go. Islamic law. There you go.
And then Daniel's tuning in from Chile. So thank you for tuning in, Daniel. And so I want to shift gears now and talk about higher education. Again, like I said just a few minutes ago, I think that the Saudi Arabian leadership bought into the hype of esports. They acquired the popular leaders of the ecosystem, which is now why they have the same strategy that caused the last bubble. That's what they're doing. Let's pay the maximum amount of money we can to get the best players and the best games and put on the biggest show possible and burn as much money as possible. And luckily for them, they happen to be in an ecosystem where most people in esports don't care if they burn as much money as possible as long as they get the bag too.
Yeah. That's funny.
And unfortunately, some of those folks with that same philosophy influence what happened in higher education. So one of the major mistakes that esports made was trying to mimic traditional sports. But in traditional sports, like 0.001% of people in the stadium are playing the game, and the other 99.999% are spectators. In gaming, basically everybody who's watching can play the game in some capacity.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So the challenge that we have in higher education is that they've tried to duplicate varsity sports into esports, and it's alienating the larger majority of folks who would otherwise participate if given the opportunity, but the program's not designed to engage them. So first we want to look at the fiscal cliff. Let me see if I have that pulled up somewhere here. I don't. I thought I did, but I lost it. Sorry. Did we talk about that already? I think we did. The enrollment.
All right, so Lord Brian had a question. He said, World Cup versus Olympics, which one had a better outcome for esports?
I think the Esports World Cup had a better. If he's talking about Esports World Cup, or if he's talking about World Cup, can you clarify? Is that World Cup FIFA or Esports World Cup? Actually, I don't have the answer either way. Maybe James does. If anybody's tuning in and has the answer, who's following, can give a rough comparison of World Cup. I assume is FIFA versus Olympics. I will look that up, Brian, and get back to you on it, or unless you have it.
So is it going to be any type of esports games at the Olympics? Have they recognized it as a sport yet or no?
So ironically, last week, I think that was last week, the IOC, International Olympics Committee, signed a 12-year deal with the Esports World Cup. Okay. So they'll be in Saudi Arabia for the next 12 years, give or take.
Okay. So no Olympic is what you're saying.
Okay, Esports World Cup 2024 versus Olympics 2023 is the question. So ask your question again, Mario, and then I'm going to answer your question, Brian.
No, I was just saying. So basically, it's not recognized in the Olympics, and it's going to be recognized in the Esports World Cup.
I think so. The reason they did that deal is so they could start to get it recognized in the Olympics. So that helps me answer Brian's question. So we had the Esports Olympics 2023. It was like an exhibition, if you will, where they introduced a handful of games. The games were terrible, and nobody played them and nobody watched them. There was a lot of criticism from the esports ecosystem about like how terrible the games were. They weren't like Fortnite or, we understand that the Olympics want sports related stuff, but they could have easily had fighting games because like you've got at least like martial arts in Olympics, racing to a degree is in there, but they didn't. They went for like digital analogs of traditional, very popular of traditional Olympics experiences, and it didn't land.
So basically they wanted to make the Olympics gamified.
Basically.
Yeah. Wow.
So that they're hoping through this partnership, I assume their hope is that by partnering with Esports World Cup, who already has the deals for all of the major games because they gave bags and bags of money to all the game publishers to get those rights, that they can then adopt those games into the 2024 and beyond Olympics.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure nobody on the board and making decisions was probably a gamer because like that just doesn't make sense. Like you don't like esports is about new games, new developers, something that's new, not nostalgia of weightlifting in the form of a game. Like that doesn't move the needle. Like who's watching that? What the average gamer 18, 20, 21 years old. They're not trying to. Who would do that for?
Exactly. It was a terrible set of decisions, and so I think they're trying to correct that mistake by partnering with one of the issues that they had was I think that they couldn't afford the licenses. Like normally, if you want to play the games at a high level, you have to cut a check to the game publishers.
Yeah.
So that's why you only see it at a handful of places. Well, if you don't have a problem cutting a bunch of checks, you don't have a problem getting licenses.
They got all that. They got Coca-Cola, all that sponsorship. They got the money. Then I think that's what NBC was like 200 million for the one 26 something 2028. Like 99. Like what's for the Olympics? They got money. It's nepotism.
They do have a ton of money, and they save. What I hear, they save a lot of money whenever they host in a location. They don't. It's like the Super Bowl, right? Like host cities don't make a lot of. They make money from the tourism, but they don't get paid by the Super Bowl host committee or the Super Bowl organization. The NFL, I guess, doesn't pay host cities to host Super Bowls in their host town.
That happened with the with under the World Cup that was in Africa, and like they spent all this money on buildings and stadiums, and now they're like decrepit now. It's like nobody's used them in 8 years. I went to Greece last kind of same thing, like they had the Olympics in 2004. And it's like a lot of those buildings are used for like something way different. Like Olympic Village is now they're like an apartment complex. They made one in a museum. It was just like and so the citizens like, man, we spent all this money, this fanfare, and our taxes went up like crazy. We have nothing to show for it. So yeah.
So I wanted to talk about higher ed as well, right? So the foundation of the issue here is the enrollment cliff. And again, for those of you who don't know, in 2008, there was a housing market crisis in the US. So this enrollment cliff may more specifically be for the US and maybe not necessarily globally. But the housing market crisis that year from like 2008 to 2011, it started a 15% reduction in like the number of kids that were born because like just the economy was tight. We were in a recession more or less. And so 18 years from that point is where we are now, where next year and in 2026, we will have 15% less people of college going age able to go to college because there's just 15% less people. And so that trend is supposed to start in 2025, really hit in 2026, and actually continue for this foreseeable future. They expect it to get worse. I wish I had the article. There's another article there's a gentleman, Nicholas Yanis, is publishing. I'll share it soon, but it speaks to that in more detail. But the long and short of it is like there was already a steady decline year over year for the last 10 years in enrollment, just because of the internet, Coursera, like digital alternatives that are more efficient, more cost effective. And then you had the lockdown, right, from COVID, and most schools weren't ready. And now there's like PTSD for students on how to learn because of that. And then added to it, all of that, you've got organizations now, even government organizations, saying you don't need to have a degree to work. It used to be required, but now it's not required. Especially a lot of tech companies are saying, we'd rather see your portfolio of work than that you have a sheet of paper. All of that compounded is creating, again, this enrollment cliff where you're going to have less students. And if the majority or significant percentage of your budget comes from your tuition, you've got this massive drop off in students, it's going to impact operations across the board.
Yeah. What do you see? And again, I'm biased. I mean, I am I'm on the foundation of Tennessee State University, the best university in the land. I'm definitely biased when it comes to school, but I always say I learn more um, socially than educationally, right? You usually learn on the job, right? So um, I wasn't taught entrepreneur, how to run businesses and things of that nature in school. I was taught, how like to kind of how to navigate through social situations. So like, what are your thoughts about higher education? Like, we know it's on a decline, but do you think like, it's not going to be any more higher education down the road, or you think it's always going to be some type of institution? Because like the way things are going, like, so we have like now the millenniums or like the alphas, I guess Gen Alphas are not going to school. Well, whatever, the millennials basically. Gen Alphas is like our children's age. But like the
Right.
millenniums now who's not going to school, then the Gen Alphas, they're definitely not going to school because their parents wasn't. Like I went to school, like I was the first person on my dad's side, to go to school and to graduate. So like he had a lot of those success stories, and like now that's kind of washed away now. Like college is like kind of mandatory. Like okay, like if you don't go to college, like you're a failure, for the millennials. But now again, the later millennials aren't going to college. So like, what do you see college in 2025 is like? I don't think college is going to go away, but like I think it's going to be a drastic difference in how we see college 20, 25 years from now than today. Like, what are your thoughts?
My thought is that the smart schools will evolve. I've been meaning to make a post about this on LinkedIn, but I think that any school that doesn't have like 4-year tuition being only 20% of its revenue in the next 10 years isn't going to make it into the next 20, 25, 30. And that's significant, right? Like 20% of the revenue coming from tuition means from a 4-year tuition means they need to make a lot of money several other places. But you've got many schools, especially several of them here in Florida, that have these vast patent portfolios and all this R&D that could be licensed. And that amount of money, especially from major corporations, could be a solid penny, right? But I think from kind of the bread and butter of academics, the opportunity is to widen the net. Most schools are focused on how can we get a student to stay at the university 4 to 6 years, right, and get a
Right.
4 to 6 year degree. You're starting to see schools talk about micro credentials, right? Minors, stuff like that. But I think that should become the majority. What you should be, and the work that I'm doing in Texas now, that program I started over there, is saying like, let's see how we can get a student from starting to job in 6 months from our education, whatever the offering is. The goal is to get them from starting to living wage in 6 months. And then, whatever that education is, provide them a credential that can be applied to a minor, which can then roll into a 4-year degree. Because the problem that we have in education right now is that you have to invest 4 to 6 years and over $100,000 in some cases, $50,000 to $100,000 to get a degree. And oftentimes the things that you learn are obsolete or outdated by the time you graduate and enter the workforce. People want to see returns on their investments as quickly as possible. You're an investor, you know that better than most, right? And then you play the long game on some investment opportunities, but you don't want to wait forever to get your return. So what we need to be doing is providing opportunities for students who are the customers to get the return on the investment for the product they pay for, their education, as quickly as possible, so they can go into the workforce, make money, and then either be able to afford to go back and get their minor or their 4-year degree, or just be done with it and say, hey, I spent my 6 months and now I'm making $60,000 a year, right? That's a great success story. We want to see tons of those at scale. Most schools philosophically aren't aligned that way, strategically aren't aligned that way. Again, I'm trying to pioneer some of that in Texas, but I think that most schools aren't there, and they're going to be really hurting in 2 years once that drop off happens, because they won't have the ability to make up the revenue fast enough.
So do you think it's the schools, or do you think it's the money behind the schools, like the loan company, like the Sally Mays of the world, federal government that subsidize and get some of that money? I know, President Biden took away from student loan debt, because there's so many big businesses involved in the loan, right? I don't see the micro. I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but I just don't see how schools will get behind that because the economics of it doesn't make sense for the people that's funding the school. So if I'm a new student, um, I don't got $3,000, so I can't go to the school. School loses. But if I get a loan, I can go to the school. The school wins and the loan company wins. So like the loan is subsidizing the college. So if they're not making no big loans, then the colleges are screwed. So I don't know if that philosophy works for schools because it takes away their primary income source. It's like, their sugar daddy ain't gonna be a sugar daddy no more because the sugar daddy don't got no more money.
Right. I hear you. So as I understand it, only 30% of college age students actually end up going off to college. The remaining 70% just don't go to college. My
Wait,
opinion.
wait. So out of 10 high school graduates, only 3 go to college and 7 do not go to college?
7 do not go to college. They either go into the military or they go and get a trade, or maybe they go to like a 2-year, like get an associate's degree. But like a 4-year institution, on average, as I understand it, only 30% of high school graduates end up going to college or university for a 4-year degree.
I wonder. Of course, that's probably national, half and half nots. Like at my it was like a class. We went in Baldwin Hills or Beverly Hills. I mean, I would think like most of everybody went to college. Yeah. So I mean, but again, that's I graduated 2000, so that's different, right, than what it is now. But that's just interesting. Like I think it would be I thought.
So one of the challenges, right, is for decades, tuition has outpaced inflation. It's just become unaffordable.
Now, because inflation is out of control.
Right. So I think that if you, again, the opportunity that I have in Texas, we're our goal, and we've got students going through now, but our goal is to go from start education, they don't know how to code, to job in 6 to 12 months for roughly $5,000. If you had a $5,000 opportunity, and you could, it's cheaper than again, we talked about it last week, like one semester of tuition is almost $14,000. One semester, and you've got to do 8 of those. So you remember you said like $120,000 for a 4-year degree versus $5,000 and immediately into work. So that's the first opportunity. The other opportunity is, even at $5,000, some people don't have it, right? A lot of people who live in paycheck to paycheck, you can still get those loans underwritten. But if you make it $5,000, now it looks attainable, accessible to more people, right? The average person is not going to say, oh, let me go invest. I'm going to invest $120,000 in my education for 4 to 6 years. I think a lot more people would say, I'm willing to invest $5,000 in 6 to 12 months of my time, at an hour, 2 hours a day, in order to get starting salary at $70,000. And now you've got so many more people on campus, and then eventually, not everybody, but a percentage of those students, when they graduate, because they're now getting a return, they'll say, oh, I'm going to be a non-traditional student now and maybe do nights and weekends or something until I get my associates or my bachelor's. It's going to take me a while, but I got a full-time job, so I don't care.
So you're saying that colleges are marketing to the wrong crowd right now, right? They should be marketing to the 70% that's not going, not the 30% that are going, which is the law of averages, right? The more people that you market to, the wider net that you cast, and I guess the colleges are looking more for the niche, right? But yeah, but then also like colleges turn down like so many people. Like I know, like think like Ohio State, for instance, said like only like 8% of the applicants actually get accepted. So like so you have for the colleges, they have a wide net of people that apply, and a lot of people they turn down. So like they don't, I don't know, unless they see the economics behind it and they start losing money. But right now, if they're turning down people, then money must be good, right? They wouldn't be turning down people.
Yeah, I don't understand why they turn down people. I don't know why they would turn down money. I mean, obviously there's physical space limits, right? Like if you require everybody to stay on campus their first year, you only have so many rooms. There's only so many beds, right? So that piece of it makes sense. But again, like virtual education, this should be able to open up to everybody.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. That I mean, colleges can make a killing if they just do. I mean, but of course, if you do all virtual, it's like, okay, well, why I'm going to college. So I mean, I understand that. But then COVID happened, so you would think. But like more companies now are like going like back into the office. Yeah, a lot of companies. Like I was on a conference call yesterday, doing like some investment stuff with people with Morgan Stanley, and like they was doing like 3 days at home, 2 day, or sorry, 3 days at the office, 2 days at home. Basically, this has been what 4 years after COVID, and like they basically got a
Mhm.
memo that later this year, like they're gonna be in the office 5 days. Like, dang, y'all still working from home? So I guess a lot of companies just have to adapt. I say that to say you think for colleges to make a large amount of money, some of the cliff that's gonna happen in 2 years, find a way around it is just to, if you go to Ohio State, if 30 people, 100,000 people, we're gonna accept you all, and if you pass, you pass. If you don't, yeah, come again as a freshman for the second time. We'll take your money.
Yeah, but that's the problem, right? Is that they will take the money, but so schools are
It's a
prioritizing getting the money
business.
in. But
It's a
it is a
business.
business. It's a business. I'm not saying they shouldn't get the money. I think they should get the money. I 100% believe they should get the money. But I think they also need to deliver the product. They're not
Now,
delivering the product. The product is not the education. People don't go to school to get an education. They go to school because they want to get a high-paying job after they graduate. That's why you have so many people dissatisfied with the thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars of debt that they have, and then working. No offense against people who work retail or fast food, working retail or fast food because those are the opportunities that are available to them. They didn't get a return on the investment of time and money they put in. Now,
yeah,
if you could guarantee that, or say 70%, 85%, sure, charge as much money as you want and let as many people in as you want. But you're saying like 85% of people who follow this formula, you're basically guaranteed to get a job at this salary. 99% of schools aren't doing that.
yeah. Yeah, and that's to your point. Like, so again, being on the foundation board, like we deal with donors, and like all donors have money, right? It's not like it's a broke donor. I ain't talking about broke, but it ain't like a broke donor. So
Right.
if you are the college that basically does what I want as a student, get a high paying job, I'm going to my university more. I'm going to support my university more. I'm going to pay more, which means you're going to have more donors, and if more donors, more money goes to the foundation. That means more money to the university or the college for different things. I definitely see that. I kind of getting over the well, I think we the enrollment right there, taking more people. Yeah, being valid and actually what you see. Um, so the program. So you're talking about micro credential. That's like 6 months to a year. That's what that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, so our program is 6 months. We have our own internal credential, but we also have a network of companies that have seen the quality of our graduates and hire them. So while it's not necessarily like an industry standard credential, it's accepted by our network of employers. So like 95% of the students who go through our program, on average, get a job offer and start within 6 months. Our program is 12 months long. Most students don't, 95% who follow the program don't even get to the 12-month mark because in 6 months they've gotten a job offer at a starting average salary of 70,000. And like, if you're looking for money, again, if your goal is to start a job, why would you continue to do education if the job offer is in front of you?
Yeah. I also wonder, like so for that case, like I did 6 months, I'm in a job, and a year or 2 years later, I don't like it. Like so, like because it was so quick for me to be credentialed and get a job, I probably just go through the process again. I go to the same college, pick something different, do it all over again. I mean, that might be a way for college to reoccurring, reoccurring people coming in, right? Like I'm burnt out a year, let's try something else. I got the
Right,
job
right. But if
here.
you made it affordable and for you to be able to do that quickly, then you give that option to people. That
Yeah,
sounds like a brilliant idea, but most schools aren't set up to do that.
yeah, yeah.
So
Hmm.
I'm gonna shift gears back over here to talk about some of the stuff, the impact of this enrollment cliff. So this is an extreme example, but I think it's indicative of what's going to happen in the future. We had in 2021, the University of Arizona launched its own esports program. They were going to have like a school sponsored team. They built $1 million arena. That was 2021. In 2024, 3 years later, They cut the funding to that program.
Wow.
And so the funding was $1 million to build the facility, the arena. And I think it's in this article, the ongoing annual recurring expense on the budget was $300,000. It was $300,000 because they got full-time staff, maybe like a director, a head coach, an assistant coach. You've got scholarships. You've got to replace equipment every 18 months or pieces of equipment every 18 months. You've got travel. You've got to pay for like the upkeep of the lights, the internet, all of that goes in. It was $300,000. Again, University of Arizona is a specific, unique example. They had like a massive budget deficit, like more than most schools. This is a very unique example, but because they had that budget deficit, they started cutting things that weren't giving them ROI, and esports was one of those things. So when you think about the 15%, assume it's 15% tuition decrease because it's 15% student enrollment decrease, plus all those other factors we talked about, it's going to eventually, over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, create more scenarios like this, where schools are going to say, well, how do we save more money? Well, we got this esports program. We built, for example, Conestoga College just built a $4 million facility. So their annual upkeep might be like $1 million a year, right? Or at least $500,000 a year. If they're not, if your esports, if you got a campus population of 20,000 students and your esports program is only actively engaging even 500 students, 1,000 students, for $300,000, that $300,000 could still go to better engage the other 20,000 students better than it would in the esports program. So why would you continue to fund that?
Yeah. Now it's not revenue generating. Like a lot of SEC schools, Alabama, University of Florida, like they dramatically now just have like the 16 schools. You have a lot of schools, the Big Ten, like Ohio State, for instance, Indiana, they have like 48 sports. They have rowing and like the sports that just make no money. So before, when the money was flowing hand over foot, then you can subsidize those because you have money. But now, if you don't have any money, then those are going to be cut. So like some of those um, legacy type sports like rowing, if I could keep rowing, that's a legacy sport that has donors attached to it, or esports that has this kid in his grandma's basement out of nowhere that's now on campus as a freshman. I'm cutting esports. So like I if this continues, I see a lot of esports, of esports arenas, esports. Maybe not the actual major, but like the actual the department per se. Like I see these going away rather quickly, actually, rather quickly.
Yeah. And so that there was a major esports conference, week-long conference happening in Orlando right now, and I've been trying to share that same warning. And folks are passionate, right? I don't take anything from them for being passionate. I admire and support the passion, but some of it's almost blind optimism, right? Like just look at the data. I'm not saying that you're doing a bad job. You may be doing a wonderful job as a director or a coach. That doesn't change like the macroeconomic forces that are going to impact your school. Most schools, maybe not again like the Power 5 schools, right? Like all of those schools with $billion endowments, they don't have to worry about that. They're going to keep paying for it just like they do for the traditional sports program. But the smaller schools, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, also, it's not their money either. So like, if I'm working now, of course, nobody wants it to be cut because they're going to lose a job, but definitely they are champion more money being pumped in for job security. Not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong, but it's just a fact, right? So they don't have skin in the game compared to like if it was a business or a private business and it was like, their money per se being spent, I think feelings would be a lot different. Like I'm like so business wise probably has a different feeling about esports. How unfortunately that's why they're cutting, right? Esports and kind of what's going on. Compared to colleges where wanted to grow, come on, government, give me more money. Let's see, I want to grow, get some job security for the next 3 to 5 years. I think a lot of that's going on as well.
And again, I just showed you an example of that, right? Paul always said that, profitability is not a concern. It's not a concern for him because it's not his money. It's not a concern for any of the tier one organizations because just like with the venture capital funding and the money from the brands and the crypto sponsorships and the NFT sponsorships, it was never their money. It was always someone else's money that they were happy to set on fire.
Yep.
So I did a couple of polls here on LinkedIn. Again, I'm just trying to warn people, again, with all due respect, with everybody hardworking, trying to get it done, trying to make it happen. But I want them to understand what's coming. So I did this poll 2 days ago. I said, what percentage of your collegiate esport program's budget is funded by your school? Again, the premise being if the budget gets cut and if your salary is paid out of that budget, like that's your personal job security.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're only 5 or 2 days in, got 23 votes, but 30, this is not statistically significant, but it's directional, right? 35% of responders said that, or responses said that the school is funding more than 75% of the esports program's budget, which includes the salaries for the director and the coaches, the staff, basically. And one of the reasons that I got to this point was, I shared with the University of Arizona, but in the last 90 days, I've seen that, and I have seen one head coach and one director be laid off. That's 3 esports program incidents in 90 days. Again, it's not statistically significant, but I think it's an early indicator of some challenging times ahead.
Yeah, that is challenging. That is challenging. Look at that, 75%.
And then, so I asked this follow-up question because that one post, that last one, that poll, people really got upset with me in the comments. So I just wanted to clarify because I feel like there's a disconnect between the information I'm saying and what I would call like an echo chamber in the collegiate esports ecosystem, where they think because they're winning tournaments that everything's fine. So I said, if your esports program, school, or grant funding was cut, would your program survive and thrive regardless? 54% of people have said yes to that. Probably have multiple layoffs, 23%, or completely shut down is another 23%. So 46% of people saying it's going to have a negative impact, 54% saying it's having no impact. The reason I added grant funding was one of the people, and I'm not going to go through the responses directly, but one person who said that less than 25% of the program was funded by the school. I went and double checked. They're funded by a 5-year grant. That's $300,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they're not impacted by the school budget being cut, but that grant's going to run out eventually. And if you don't have the program in place for sustainable revenue, you're not getting any more money from the grant, and you're not getting any more money from the school. You're never getting money from the school.
That is a job worldwide as well.
And I know that there's a school up in North Carolina. I won't say which one, but I spoke to a school, esports program director in North Carolina, and he said that they have a 3-year budget from the school. So they basically have 3 years to figure it out, and then the money's going away.
Yeah, I think that money's going away, Marcus. Yeah, I think that money's. It sucks, but if schools are losing money, and and also from a new, I'm not trying to get political, but it appears as if we're going to have a new administration. And that new administration definitely does not give money to school as much as the current administration. So it's going to be funding cut, just period. So, yeah, I definitely think individuals in that space might want to beef up their resume right now. Hopefully, nothing happens from a layoff standpoint, but looks like it's inevitable, right?
Yeah, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. This, full disclosure, I work on a gaming company for a gaming company, building a game that I think is a solution to this. I've been talking about sustainability in the space for 7 years, and a lot of those philosophies are in this. So I'm going to jump over there very quickly. Shameless plug. I have a solution that is sustainable, and I want to invite both the professional esports organizations and the scholastic esports organizations to at least try it, because the entry level is free and the upside is comparatively speaking, like exponential based on the entire ecosystem not being sustainable. So if you look at the bottom here of the screen, you see play the demo, hello.iamhacker.cc. I'm going to jump over here just for a minute or two to share this with you, right? The game is called IH Internet War. It's a real-time strategy MOBA game where you play the single player with a mouse and keyboard, but the multiplayer, the competitive piece, the esports piece, you can play either with a mouse or by writing code in any programming language. What we have designed it to do is to help kids or students, right, gamer students, kickstart careers in tech and in gaming. Most companies today are tech enabled and have software developers on their team, especially gaming companies. Game studios are hiring programmers. Our game is designed for you to play the single player and have fun, play the multiplayer, the competitive, and have fun, but use that fun to then learn and sharpen your skills in writing code. Because in order to start winning the coding tournaments, you have to get better, progressively better and better at writing code. That way, this now becomes an interactive, fun, rewarding experience to make you, encourage you, help you become better at writing code. Our goal ultimately, let's say sponsored tournaments, we want to bring in game studios and tech companies and say, hey, sponsor our tournaments. We're going to help you get into gaming. And since you're hiring programming interns and entry-level programmers, why don't you use our platform to scout, vet, recruit, and hire those interns, because you'll be able to see the code or see the winners of the coding tournaments. The ones who are winning consistently are consistently the best coders. So we've got some paid tournaments that we've already started. We've got Europe and Central Asia is one region, North America is one region, global. So you can basically compete in all regions. It's free to play the demo version. We're gonna have some free access to the tournaments. We have lower prize pools, but if you want to participate in the higher prize pools, you pay a one-time fee that helps us provide direct funding back to people playing, right? So we're unlike most of the esports ecosystem from the publisher perspective, we're taking most of the money that we get in and putting it back into the ecosystem to cover the prizes. So we want to give you prizes for paying for playing in the tournaments. And then we want to make it easy for you to play the game. The demo is free. Make it easy for you to play in the tournaments. Again, free or lower tiers, pay for the higher ones. And then ultimately, if you win the tournaments, you kickstart your career. And we're able to get now business value. Remember, we talked about impact focused, brand relevant, competitive gaming communities. If we help tech companies who have programmers hire gamers to become software developers, they're going to continue to put dollars in and sponsor tournaments so that the entire global ecosystem now has a third-party continuous source of funding that isn't necessarily tied to human rights violations, and is they have an incentive to continue to invest in it because they're getting something back from just saying we were in esports and we got a bunch of impressions.
I like that. And so you can use this like using code in Unity, or what are they playing this on?
So they can write code in any language: JavaScript, C#, you name it, Python, any programming language. Basically, you use any code editor to write the language in any language, and you're basically writing the instructions for how the robots behave. And then you submit it via the API to our system. And actually, in the middle, our competitive multiplayer is like best first to five. It's first to five, basically first to three wins. 5 rounds, first to 3 wins. For best 3 or 5, basically. In the middle of that 5-round series, you can actually in real time update your code. So let's say you play first round and you lose. In the middle of that round, you could be writing code reflecting on why you lost and send a new set of instructions. So in the second round, that same bot behaves differently based on like how your opponent is playing against you. So there's that. That's a shameless plug for this. Again, the demo is free to play. I played it a lot. You probably see some streams on LinkedIn. People play the demo on average 80 minutes per session. It's a ton of fun. I have a ton of fun with it. The multiplayer is designed to be fun first, but also have a dual purpose where we are providing meaningful business value back to businesses, non-endemic and endemic sponsors, so they put their money back into the ecosystem. You can't really say that for basically any other game in the professional esports ecosystem. And then for schools, the way that makes it sustainable is now each school can go to the tech companies and the tech-enabled companies in its local ecosystem and say, hey, you're already hiring. Like, let's help you hire better. You're spending money on headhunting. Why don't you spend some of that budget and build relationships with gamers, with the youth, get your brand integrated into our ecosystem? Those same small and medium businesses may not be able to afford branding on the scoreboard, right? For the Coca-Colas, the $1 million multi-year contracts, but they can sponsor a $1,000 tournament, a $10,000 tournament, maybe a $100,000 tournament as they continue to see the returns from hiring quality software developers.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's my pitch for that. That's the plug.
Ages. What age do you think a person should start that at?
To start on this, we believe that high school is probably ideal. If there are coding programs in middle school, that can work as well. We've got some primer tutorials, right? I'm not going to teach you how to write all kinds of code, but like some basics, opening up the code editor, some basic like hello world, basic to get you started. But the cool thing about it is that we want to match skill level with skill level. So like ranked matches. So not only do we want like people who are newer to coding to only compete against people who are new to coding and the experts at coding compete against the experts, we actually have like a scholastic league, like a student league, where we can provision spaces so that only students from a specific school can compete against other students from a specific school. So if you had like a 7th grade computer science class, they could all only compete against each other. They're all learning it at the same pace. And so it's level set.
Okay. That's cool. That's cool. Cool.
So that's like I said, the shameless plug. I think it's a ton of value for the ecosystem. It's sustainability for professional and collegiate. I still see unsustainability, unfortunately, in professional and collegiate. So you don't have to play my game. I think you should just go find another solution because we've got some major problems coming up in the next couple of years. And if you don't have a solution, we already saw what happened in the last bubble when people just kept spending money, weren't planning for how they could sustain themselves. Just do something. You can do this. I'm recommending this. If you don't want to work with me because of whatever reason that you think I should be shadow banned, just find some other solution. I don't want to see another collapse. I don't want to see hundreds of people laid off around the world, right? I don't want to see collegiate esports programs collapse. But I also don't see anybody talking about this, the problems, or talking about solutions.
So you seriously got shadow banned? Like, are you being serious?
I had somebody tell me, he was a CEO of one of the most popular esports organizations in our ecosystem, say that they said that they and their colleagues say that I'm one of the biggest grifters in the global esports.
I'm not looking at you.
I laughed too. Like when he said it to me, I was like, how? Right? Like that virtual esports conference career expo I produced in 2021, it was free. I made it free. I have given out, I don't know how many free copies of my book, right? And most times when I give presentations, right, for free, right? Like I give away free physical copies and digital copies of my book. I mentor for free. You know, I provide, like whenever I give a presentation, I make the slides available for free. And somehow, despite all of the actual grifters who are running these organizations, burning money as fast as they can get it, me calling that out and trying to help people get sustainable businesses makes me the grifter.
Wow. Wow, that's funny. Wow. Well, so I guess you need to change your name from Marcus Esports Howard to Marcus the Grifter Howard.
I should do that for a week and see what happens. That'd be funny. That'd be funny. So, thanks everybody who joined us today. Next week, back to the conversation on crypto. We had talked about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, and NFTs. We're going to bring on a guest. His name is Peter, blank on his last name, starts with a D. He runs that, I don't know if we had talked about this organization, Nouns. We talked about this? I think it's nouns.gg. Let me pull this up real quick. Just give you a sneak preview for next week, and then we'll call it a day. Nouns.gg.
That's a alley right there. I bought I bought another Ethereum a couple days ago. So yeah, man. Great conversation next week.
So this is an esports organization that didn't raise venture capital. They used NFTs to sell ownership of a portion of the organization. So you still have the executives making business decisions, but now the community has a meaningful stake and a voice and part of decision-making authority for how the organization decides how it operates, whether that be like if it's going to sell merchandise or if it's going to participate in any particular tournaments or different community events. It's in part decided by the community. And that's one of the things that NFTs and DAOs provide to you that, yeah, you could have, right? Like GoFundMe or Kickstarter or equity crowdfunding is the traditional way to do that. This is the bleeding edge emerging technology way to do that. And this organization, I think, is built more towards sustainability. So the CEO is going to be joining us next week to talk more about this, his journey in traditional esports. He was actually the former CEO of Evil Geniuses, one of the top 10 esports organizations in the world. He also left from there and was employed by Esports Engine, and he was a part of the layoffs when they got acquired by Saudi Arabia.
Oh wow!
So there's layers to it. There's layers to it. Now he's building this, and one of the predictions that I made, I think 2 years ago, was that I said within 3 or 5 years, this type of organization was going to completely replace traditional esports organizations.
Interesting.
So hope you tune in next week. Thanks for joining us. Mario, how can people find and support you?
Yeah, hit me up at Painful Profits. We make it can be painful, but Painful Profits. Or check out multiple websites, Homes Financial or our estate planning platform, The Relax Estate.
Awesome, awesome. And I still have free copies of the digital version of my book. I've got the presentation that I gave that recommended specific sustainability recommendations for collegiate esports. So if you're watching and you are a school administrator or an esports director or esports coach, just send me a message. I'm happy to send that to you. Again, most of the stuff that I share is for free. I don't make any money doing that. I do make money occasionally when I do some consulting. Ironically, because I've been shadow banned, there's been much less consulting over the last several years. But I care about this ecosystem. I want esports to be sustainable, to be here long term. So I'm here to support everyone. I wish we made better decisions, but there's no better time like today to start making quality decisions. With that, again, click the link at the bottom, hello.iamhacker.cc, to download the free demo. Let me know what you think about the game if you want to get involved in esports, and we will see you again next Thursday for another episode of the Level Up Your Wealth podcast.